What happens if China builds a real diesel outboard? It is the question every Western marine analyst has been quietly debating for the past 3 years. They argued about whether it was technically possible, whether the certifications could be cleared, whether Chinese manufacturers had the engineering capability to compete with Oxy and Cox at the high-horsepower diesel outboard level. But the question itself is wrong. China is not going to build a real diesel outboard. China has already built one. A Chinese company called TSD has been quietly producing diesel outboards in 80, 120, 150, 200 and 300 horsepower configurations for several years. The engines have high-pressure common rail injection, forged steel crankshafts, electronic control systems, and full certifications from the China Classification Society. The price is roughly half of what Oxy charges. The target customer is exactly the government, military, and commercial fleet operator that Oxy built its business around. And what they have built is going to do to the diesel outboard category what BYD did to the electric vehicle market, what DJI did to consumer drones, and what Huawei did to telecommunications equipment. The Western marine industry just has not figured it out yet. Most Western marine analysts have never heard of TSD. The product line is built by Xiamen Tofu Electronics Engineering, a Chinese company that uses marine high-speed diesel engines from the Heyri Group as the powerheads for its outboard configurations. The product is listed for international sale, the certifications are documented, and the full horsepower range is in production. The category has been quietly building inside China for years, while Western marine coverage has stayed focused on OXE, Cox, and the recent Caudwell launch. The technical specifications would not look out of place on any Western diesel outboard. The Chinese product uses high-pressure common rail fuel injection, which is the same fundamental technology that powers the BMW-derived Oxy 300 and the Ricardo-developed Cox CX 300. Forged steel crankshafts handle the load cycles required for marine commercial duty. Turbochargers and intercoolers are configured for sustained operation at full throttle. Electronic control systems manage fuel mapping and emissions in line with current commercial diesel standards. The TSD diesel outboard line is not built from agricultural cast-offs. It is purpose-engineered marine propulsion using proven Chinese diesel architecture that has cleared the China Classification Society's marine product approval process. The certifications matter because they signal serious engineering investment. The China Classification Society is a member of the International Association of Classification Societies and is internationally recognized even if it does not yet carry the brand prestige of Lloyd's Register or DNV in Western commercial markets. A Chinese marine engine cleared for commercial vessel installation under Chinese maritime law has gone through emissions testing, durability validation, and quality management auditing. The TSD line has cleared every certification gate that matters inside China, and the company has begun working through the additional processes required for international market entry. The customer profile is where the story gets uncomfortable for Western specialists. TSD positions its diesel outboard line for the same segments where OXE, Cox, and Caudwell expect to compete: government procurement vessels, commercial workboats, military patrol applications, Coast Guard rescue platforms, fishing operations running long daily saltwater hours, and yacht tender propulsion for owners who prefer single-fuel logistics. The Chinese product line is aimed directly at the commercial diesel outboard market that Western specialists have been treating as their protected territory for the past decade. Beyond TSD, the broader Chinese diesel outboard ecosystem is more developed than Western coverage acknowledges. Guangzhou Marco Power Machinery produces 40-horsepower diesel outboards specifically configured for government procurement contracts. Sino Output Plant in Shanghai sells high-speed common rail diesel outboards into European and American export channels. Several smaller manufacturers in Guangdong and Zhejiang provinces build diesel outboards in horsepower ranges from 9.9 up to 80. Often as direct competitors to the small portable diesel outboards used in tender and lifeboat applications across Asian and African markets. The pricing is the part that should worry anyone selling diesel outboards into the global commercial market. TSD does not publish retail pricing in publicly accessible channels, but supplier listings and industry sourcing put Chinese diesel outboard pricing well below comparable Western diesel outboards. A 200-horsepower TSD diesel outboard reaches price points that the OXE 200 series cannot match, particularly for buyers like Chinese state-owned enterprises, African government fleets, and Southeast Asian commercial operators who were never going to be Western premium pricing customers in the first place. The price gap is wide enough to absorb significant uncertainty about Chinese reliability, and still leave the value calculation favorable for the Chinese product. The technical capability gap between Chinese and Western diesel outboards is narrower than most marine industry coverage suggests. Each year, the gap closes further. The fundamental architecture of a high-pressure common rail diesel engine is no longer proprietary technology. Chinese manufacturers have been building these engines for over a decade, supplying them to commercial truck markets, agricultural equipment, and stationary power generation. The Hairy Group's marine-adapted versions are built on the same engineering foundation that powers Chinese commercial trucks operating in equivalent emissions and durability environments to Western trucks. Forged steel crankshafts, common rail injection systems, turbocharger configurations, and electronic control architectures are all mature technologies that no longer represent a meaningful technical moat for any Western specialist. What separates a Western diesel outboard from a Chinese diesel outboard is not the engine. It is the integration. Oxy built its product around a horizontal engine layout with a carbon fiber pulley belt drive, an architecture that took years to engineer and patent. Cox built its CXO 300 around a purpose-designed 4.4-liter V8 marine block developed in partnership with Ricardo Engineering. Caudwell built its AX300 around the patented axis drive integrated steering system and dual contra-rotating propellers. The Western specialists have invested heavily in proprietary integration technology that makes their products distinctive at the high end of the market. Chinese manufacturers have taken a different approach. The TSD diesel outboard uses conventional vertical engine mounting with traditional gearcase architecture, the same general layout that gasoline outboards have used for decades. This is the simplest possible engineering approach to a diesel outboard. It produces a product that works without trying to invent new architectures around it. The Chinese outboard does what gasoline outboards do, just with a diesel engine in place of gasoline. The Western outboards do things that gasoline outboards cannot do. For a customer who simply wants reliable diesel propulsion on the back of a workboat, the difference may not matter enough to justify the price premium. The certification path into Western markets is the second technical barrier, and it is one Chinese manufacturers are actively working through. The European Recreational Craft Directive certification process is open to any Chinese manufacturer willing to invest in the testing and documentation required. The United States EPA certification process is more difficult and has historically slowed Chinese marine engine entry into the American recreational market. But it is not impossible. Several Chinese manufacturers have already begun the certification process for select horsepower ranges. The regulatory wall that has limited Chinese gasoline outboards in American recreational markets does not necessarily apply with the same force to diesel outboards entering through commercial and government procurement channels, where certification requirements are different, and Chinese product can enter through bilateral procurement agreements that bypass the traditional retail dealer model. The reliability question is the most serious technical concern, and it is the one Chinese manufacturers will need to prove they have solved before serious commercial customers will switch over. The Chinese diesel outboard product line is too new for there to be 20-year-old engines still running in fleets. The operational history that Western buyers want to see does not yet exist in publicly verifiable form. The China Classification Society certifications are real, but they are not the same thing as a decade of documented commercial fleet operation. A Western commercial operator considering a switch from OXE to TSD is being asked to take on risk that an OXE purchase does not require, and that risk premium is real even when the price advantage is also real. The Chinese manufacturers know this. The next 5 years of commercial sales will be spent building the operational track record that converts price advantage into trust. The reasons Chinese diesel outboards have not yet displaced Western competitors come down to the same factors that limit Chinese gasoline outboards in Western markets. But the specific obstacles are different at the diesel level, and they fall in different orders of severity. The dealer network problem is the first and most severe constraint. Yamaha, Mercury, Suzuki, and Honda have spent decades building gasoline outboard service infrastructure across the United States and Europe. Oxy, Cox, and Caudwell have spent the past decade building dealer networks specifically for diesel outboards in commercial markets. Cascade Engine Center handles Caudwell distribution in the Pacific Northwest. Wilhelm Marine handles Parson distribution in the United Kingdom. Specialized commercial marine dealers across Europe and North America have built training programs and parts inventory around the existing Western diesel brands. TSD and the other Chinese diesel outboard manufacturers have effectively no Western dealer network. A commercial buyer in Florida who orders a TSD 300 horsepower diesel outboard has nowhere to take it for service when something fails. And that single fact eliminates a significant percentage of potential commercial customers before the purchase decision even gets serious. The parts availability problem compounds the dealer problem. Even when a Chinese diesel outboard is dimensionally similar to a Western equivalent, the internal components are different enough that off-the-shelf Western parts often will not fit. A water pump impeller from an OXE 300 will not fit a TSD 300, even though both engines occupy roughly the same physical envelope. The injectors, the ECU, the turbocharger, the coolant components, and the gear case parts are all sourced from the Chinese manufacturer's own supply chain. Commercial operators in Western markets are dependent on shipping replacement parts from Chinese suppliers, with lead times that can stretch into weeks or months. For a commercial fishing vessel that needs to be back on the water by Friday, that dependency is a structural disqualifier. The reliability uncertainty is the third major constraint, and it is the hardest one for Chinese manufacturers to solve quickly. A Western commercial buyer evaluating a lower-priced Chinese diesel outboard against an OXE 300 is making a risk-weighted decision. The Chinese engine may save tens of thousands of dollars at purchase, but if it fails at 1,500 hours and requires a complete powerhead replacement, the savings disappear instantly. The OXE 300 carries a documented 1,500-hour warranty and an established service history with thousands of engines in commercial use. Chinese factory warranty terms exist on paper but have a limited international support framework, and the operational history of TSD diesel outboards is concentrated in Chinese commercial fleets that Western buyers cannot easily verify. The branding problem is the fourth constraint, and it takes the longest to solve. The Chinese gasoline outboard market spent 20 years overcoming the perception that Chinese-built marine engines were unreliable, and that perception is still actively shaping buyer decisions in 2026. The Chinese diesel outboard market will need to repeat that journey, and the gap between TSD and OXE in customer trust is substantial regardless of how good the actual engineering becomes. Commercial buyers, especially government buyers in Western countries, follow procurement guidelines that favor established suppliers with documented operational records. Breaking into those procurement channels requires sustained commercial performance over years, which Chinese manufacturers have not yet accumulated outside their domestic markets. The political dimension is the fifth constraint, and it is increasingly relevant. What trade tensions between China and the United States have created a procurement climate where Chinese-built marine equipment faces additional scrutiny, particularly for defense and government applications. Supply chain security requirements continue to tighten across multiple Western markets. Even when the engineering and pricing would otherwise justify a purchase, Chinese marine engines now face barriers that did not exist 5 years ago and that are unlikely to soften in the near term. The Chinese diesel outboard challenge does not become serious because of one big breakthrough. It becomes serious through a series of incremental shifts that the marine industry is already starting to see. A price gap is moving in one direction. Chinese manufacturing keeps scaling, while Western premium pricing remains static. A fully equipped TSD 300 horsepower diesel outboard at 1/3 the price of an OXE 300 represents a price differential that even the most risk-averse commercial buyer cannot ignore indefinitely. A credible warranty backed by an established Western service partner makes the value proposition start working. Documented commercial fleet hours from international markets makes the reliability concern start shrinking. None of these conditions exist in 2026, but they are the kind of obstacles Chinese manufacturers have systematically removed in other industries before disrupting Western incumbents. The dealer network problem has two visible solution paths. The first is acquisition. A Chinese diesel outboard manufacturer with capital backing could buy an existing Western marine service network outright, or sign exclusive distribution partnerships with commercial dealers willing to add a Chinese line for the right margin. The second path is organic growth through specialty markets where Western brands are weak, building dealer relationships in African fishing fleets, Southeast Asian commercial operators, Middle Eastern Coast Guard procurements, and South American patrol applications, then using those operational track records to enter Western commercial markets later. Both paths take years rather than months, but neither requires the engineering leap that Western analysts assume Chinese manufacturers cannot make. The EPA certification path is more expensive than dealer network expansion, but less complex than the engineering work itself. EPA Tier 3 marine compression ignition certification requires emissions testing, durability validation, and ongoing compliance monitoring. The investment is substantial for a Chinese manufacturer entering the American market, but it is not a structural barrier for a company committed to Western entry. The underlying engine technology has already cleared the equivalent regulatory testing required for Chinese commercial operations under the China Classification Society framework, which means EPA certification becomes a documentation and validation exercise, rather than a fundamental engineering reset. What scenarios actually lead to Chinese diesel outboards reshaping the global market? Acquisition is the cleanest path. A major Western marine company facing competitive pressure could buy a Chinese diesel outboard manufacturer to access the cost structure and engineering capacity, then market the product under a Western brand name with full Western dealer support. Geographic fragmentation is the slower path. Chinese diesel outboards dominate Asian, African, and South American commercial markets, while Western specialists retain dominance in European and North American premium segments, splitting the global market along regional lines that mirror the broader pattern of Chinese industrial competition. Technology leapfrog is the wildcard path. A Chinese manufacturer develops a genuinely superior diesel outboard architecture, integrating hybrid components or alternative fuel compatibility, and uses that technical advantage to override the dealer and reliability concerns that currently limit market entry. The marine industry has been wrong before about how quickly Chinese manufacturing transitions from cheap copy to legitimate competitor. Automotive, electric vehicles, drones, and consumer electronics all played out the same way. The signal arrived in commercial markets first. The Western analysts dismissed it as years away, and the actual disruption arrived faster than anyone predicted. The Western diesel outboard specialists who treat the Chinese threat as inevitable but distant will be the ones who lose market share they thought was permanently theirs. The next 5 years of diesel outboard competition will look different from the past 10, and the Chinese factor is one of the variables that has not yet been fully priced into Western strategy. Chinese diesel outboards will continue building market share inside China and in regional commercial markets where Western specialists do not have strong distribution. Government procurement in Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America will keep shifting toward Chinese diesel outboards as price gaps widen and certifications align with regional regulatory requirements. Western specialists will lose access to those markets gradually, not catastrophically, but the loss accumulates over years. The medium-term question is whether one of the major Western marine companies will preemptively address the Chinese threat through acquisition, joint venture, or licensing arrangements. Yamaha and Mercury have the capital to acquire Oxy outright if they decide to enter the diesel category, but they could just as easily acquire a Chinese diesel outboard manufacturer to access cost structure and engineering capacity at the same time. Ox Marine and Caudwell are positioned as premium specialists, which means they need to keep building technical differentiation that justifies their pricing against an increasingly capable Chinese alternative. Western specialists who survive the next decade will be the ones who studied the Chinese threat seriously, while there was still time to respond. The ones who treated it as inevitable but distant will find themselves explaining to their boards why their commercial market share evaporated to a competitor most analysts had not bothered to study seriously. The marine industry is about to learn the same lesson automotive learned 5 years ago, electronics learned 10 years ago, and drones learned almost overnight. Chinese manufacturing does not arrive. It is already there. The only question is whether you noticed before it became impossible to compete.